Good news, everyone! I'm not dead. A lot has happened lately, and I just haven't had the time or the energy to make any videos. That being said, I'm still streaming a couple of times a week, so I've been playing a ton of games and wanted to share a few here, so let's get right to it. Back when this game came out, it got a lot of flack from critics because it is that transitional period in the 360 PS3 era where Capcom was being shunned for anything it put out. While I do think that Remember Me could definitely use a little more polish in some areas, I had a really good time with this one. It's got a neat setting and story concept with some great atmosphere and music as well as a decent combat system. Where it falls a bit short is on some of the voice acting, and things in the story definitely seem a bit rushed or not quite fleshed out enough to make a large enough impact. The combat can be a bit repetitive, but it has a neat system in place where you can kind of build your own combos. You gain attacks of various types, so you can do things like reduce cooldowns of special skills or heal yourself on hit. It's interesting to build different types of combos for the situation at hand because different enemies require fresh approaches to take them down effectively. It's very straight to the point and doesn't stick around too long to outstay its welcome, but I also don't see myself going back to it anytime soon. Definitely give this one a shot. It's better than a lot of people give it credit for, and if nothing else, it's a spectacle to look at sometimes. Take a top-down adventure game and make it a shooter, and that's essentially what you have here. It's a lighthearted adventure where you get new guns and blast the guts out of everything around you. The story is surprisingly good if you can get past all the gun-related puns, and there's a lot of really good music in here to make the encounters a bit more fun. I'd say the main thing it lacks is a variety in the dungeons and overworld. There's a decent amount of stuff to do, but it doesn't really amount to anything outside of a few light puzzles and only a couple of gimmicks. Many of the areas feel identical in execution even though the backdrop is different. That being said, I still feel this game does enough well to warrant a sequel that expands the gameplay a bit. The biggest downside is probably that the starting weapon is the best once upgraded, so you can simply hold down the trigger and everything around you dies. Some of the later weapons are worthy enough, but have longer reloads, so until you've dumped enough points into them, they more or less sit on your back until the time comes to clear a room or two. This game is also co-op, so feel free to drag a friend along for the ride. It's a short experience, but it's a decent one. This is a top-down Souls-style game that has a good art style going for it, but it doesn't do anything all too special with it. The combat works well enough, but the areas aren't all that interesting aside from killing dudes and looting items. Most of the weapons kinda suck, and you'll find yourself coasting through the game with pretty much the same two weapons the whole time. There's a gem socketing system to give weapons added benefits, but it doesn't help too much overall. What is kinda neat is how you can get blessings that you equip after beating bosses, and you can level them up for passive benefits like more experience or having damage dealt to you reduced. This is a surprisingly short game, but you'll die a lot trying to figure out how to dodge and parry the various enemies. I'd like to see something like this expanded upon because they really nailed the art style and the enemy design is pretty grotesque. There just needs to be a bit more in the way of puzzles and bosses aside from open gate, fight dude, open another gate, fight another dude. A charming little platformer where you play as a girl with a giant fist and your quest is to, well, destroy all monster girls. It has a very early Genesis look and feel, but everything is pretty polished. You gain abilities as the game progresses, and it has some decent boss fights. The levels themselves are fairly short and aren't too challenging, so you can blow through this in a single sitting. The soundtrack especially is pretty good, and I found myself humming along to quite a few of the tracks after a little while. The map theme alone had me just bobbing my head for hours. It leans pretty heavily on the quirky dialogue, but it doesn't come off as too annoying and doesn't overstay its welcome. Have I mentioned this game is completely free on Steam? It's a pretty short game overall, but it has a lot of heart, and that's what really matters in my opinion. Sparklite is a cute little top-down adventure roguelite where you're trying to rebuild your town. While it doesn't do anything too different from other games of its ilk, it does have a solid art style and plays very well for what it is. One neat little feature is the patch system in which you can give yourself passive upgrades to increase things like damage and health, but they're attached in a sort of grid-like structure where different upgrades are different sizes, so you need to manage the space in which you place them. As you progress, the patches can be upgraded to make more efficient use of the space, and you even get different weapon schematics and stuff to customize your loadout. I think the thing I like the most about this game is that everything felt achievable and was wrapped up in a neat little package. It didn't require a huge time investment, and I was able to beat it pretty easily with minimal grinding for resources. I'm lumping these two together because they're very similar in a lot of ways. I played the first Mirror's Edge when it came out and enjoyed it way back then. I'm happy to report that it still holds up pretty well for the most part, and that it's still really fun to get into a flow state and pull off some sick parkour. It has a clean art style that evokes a dystopian future, and the use of white along with the basic color palette just makes everything pop. It feels really great to find clever shortcuts to the levels, but sadly anytime you have to stop to fight something or get caught up in the story, things tend to drop off a little bit. It was a great effort to make a game about parkour, and a lot of it translated very well into the sequel. Catalyst does a good job of preserving a lot of what made the original so fun to play, but brought it into an open world. While free running still feels great, the world somehow feels underutilized. You find yourself just running through the same areas over and over again, and the side missions don't really add a whole lot to the gameplay. Like the first game, the story is just kind of meh, and it's really unfortunate considering a dystopian future where free runners are needed to avoid surveillance sounds like such a cool concept brimming with ideas, and somehow DICE managed to make it boring. As always, more videos to come. I just need to get back into the swing of things after taking a long break from doing anything. I played a ton of games over the last year, so if I don't do something with the recordings on my hard drive, it's going to explode from being crammed so tight.